Men, we're going to go ahead and start a new book, the 17th book of Yisrayl, and hopefully, praise Yahweh, hopefully everybody was able to get a copy of it at the feast. The greatest gathering of all time is the subtitle for it. It's got a great dedication in it, and of course we're going to start on page 1, chapter 1. And this was a sermon that was given by Pastor in the first Roman month of the year 2017 on the 7th day. And it's entitled, Yahweh Foretells the Future. And before I read the subtitle, there are a lot of great pointers in this sermon that Pastor gave that we're going to cover, all about prophecy and how we fit in this great plan of Yahweh, in the prophecy that Yahweh has brought forth through His house here in the last days. The subtitle is, The Destruction We See in the Fourth Part of the Earth is Clearly Prophesied. And of course, Pastor covered that in great detail here at the Feast of Pentecost. So let's go ahead and start in verse 1. Pastor says, Shalom, everyone. We're going to have to make a lot of racket. There are quite a few of us, joyful cheering and praise to Yahweh. Praise to Yahweh. And I'm not going to be able to hoop the way he does. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Okay, and in verse 2, what wonderful news we're getting. I told Kahan Eliah here to repeat that one, because it's very important that you understand. And Pastor gets straight to the point here. And he goes on to say, these things were written about beforehand, and that's what we've got to realize. You know, this is all the prophecy that is being explained and expounded upon only in the house of Yahweh, because the house of Yahweh and the witness Yisrayl is the only place on the face of the earth that has the inspiration of Yahweh. And of course, that's all through Yahshua Messiah. These things were written about beforehand, before they ever took place, before they ever started taking place. That's the important part. Now, this is very, very important in what Pastor covers here. They signify the prophecies, as the great Kohan Benjamin told us a while ago. They signify them and make you understand their importance. So he uses that word signify twice, and then he goes on to say, wear them like a signet in your brain to make you understand and remember how important these prophecies are and the fact they're coming to pass as Yahweh said they would. That's the important part. And one of the things I gathered, about this sermon and also this first part that Pastor talks about is the recent sermons some of the recent sermons that Pastor has explained in many years ago, and the great Kohan Yachanan Bragg had given some sermons about the heart and how the heart and the brain interact, and the heart being the seat of the intelligence of an individual also brings forth the desires and the things that we desire to put into place in our lives. Okay? Now, he goes on and, let's cover it about the map here. Let me see. Let me get to this first, showing the map on the monitor. This is from Google, showing a fourth part of the earth. Now, always remember about that fourth part of the earth, especially as everything is taking place today, even in today's news. If you want to Google a fourth part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates, you would get this information. You got that? Everybody's got a Google, right? Surely everybody does, but me, I don't have one. And of course, everybody knows that Pastor doesn't. He has others to search the internet for him. Okay, and if you can see that map, and he's showing it on the monitor, that's going as close as the camera will go But the first one you'll find if you Google it is this link to our article that reads, to read it now, go to the House of Yahweh. So what he's explaining here, and he's talked about it even I think since then, is that if you Google the fourth part of the earth, it will bring you to all kind of sites and articles that deal with the House of Yahweh and how we have brought this forth in prophecy, being in and around the great river Euphrates. Okay, so going on, he says, if you Google it, is this link to our article that says, to read it now, go to the House of Yahweh. Did you get that? He asking a question. Let me read it again. Now catch this. Listen, everybody. This is about the fourth part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates. Now remember the scriptures about the fourth part of the earth. If you Google that phrase, the first thing you get is a link, and it says, to read it now, go to the House of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. You know, so, and you could see how all this is bringing forth everything that Pastor has brought forth in prophecy, especially what deals with the quartet and everything that pertains to the quartet, how the quartet fits in prophecy. So let's go down to verse 7, because we've got to cover quite a bit, and it's a very lengthy sermon. Okay, in verse 7, Pastor says, let's see, Russia Today released an article in 2014. The great Kohan Shaul Hawkins covered that one this morning. You need to remember these things now. Remember the news and how important the news is whenever we listen to the news on the Sabbath. Okay? Try to remember the news. This is very, very important here. Now, don't get distracted with the cares and the stupidity that don't matter, because why? That's what the world is doing. You know, and the world looks at the news every day, especially here in the United States, and says, oh, well, that's not taking place in my backyard. I'm not going to worry about it. You know, brethren, that is pure stupidity. We know and understand that whenever Yahweh's prophecies come to pass about this nuclear exchange that's going to take place, it's going to affect everybody on the earth. And not that Yahweh did it, but mankind caused it, you know. And of course, all of that is from the results of sin. The Global Warming book is a great book to read about that, and it's now being covered in the First Day Night class. Okay, so Pastor says, don't get distracted with the cares and the stupidity that don't matter. And a lot of scripture should come to your mind, especially the things that Yeshua brought forth about being focused and knowing and understanding that if we believe in the one sent and the House of Yahweh as being the only place on the face of the earth that can teach the laws and the prophecies, we're doing the right thing. Okay? Let's jump over to verse 9. I read years ago that to reach an unbeliever, now this was 100 years ago, to reach an unbeliever you had to actually be on a radio. You had to be on a radio for 2 to 3 years before they would respond. In this day and age, it's different. Since then, computers have been invented. They didn't have computers when I was a child. They started in the year what? 1934. But these home-owned computers, we were printing the prophetic word without these. And many of us, you know, especially those that have been here for, say, 10 plus years, you can understand and really imagine technology the way it's advanced in the House of Yahweh in the last days, you know, because, you know, to reach out, when I came in, the reach out program was a very, very important part of the work. And that today has totally been overtaken by everything that's on the internet and all of the other means of communication. Okay, continuing on here. They were available and talked about, but I think the first one we wanted to buy was like $2,300. Okay, think about that, you know, about the cost back then. That was one you could use at home. That was when they were first started out to get in the homes. Now, I think you could buy them for about $700 to $800 now today. And, that's another thing that we should look at, and what technology is brought forth through the prophecy that Daniel has brought forth, is that it's so much easier now for someone to afford communications through the internet. And Yahweh has allowed for that to take place only for the preaching and the publishing of the message, not for the misuse that takes place in the world today. Okay? Let's go over to verse 13. Okay, on the next page, page 3. The third news release here is Yisrayl Hawkins says, real religious freedom is when religious truth is known and understood. And we should be able to understand by now that that can only be done here at the House of Yahweh. Just think of how fitting the titles of the programs are. Yisrayl Hawkins says, it's the way that we will always learn and understand. If we don't follow our teacher and our leader and our head, Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins, we will never grow as the House of Yahweh is growing today. Okay? So continuing on there, that's religious freedom to hear and learn, to know the truth. And think about these freedoms in the United States that Yahweh allowed for his house to be reestablished in. That's freedom, and that's what Yahweh has made possible. Yahweh gives understanding to whom he wants to give understanding. And he says, you're not going to get understanding. He says, you're not going to get understanding. None of your wickedness is going to let you understand. Now, he's talking about the people of the world now. No wicked, no evil, no God worshipers are going to understand. So please, when you drop a subtle hint or you give an example of righteousness in front of somebody in the world, leave it at that. If they're being called, they'll do what? They'll ask questions. If they don't ask questions, you planted the seed and go ahead and move on. Okay? That's in the same chapters that the priests were all quoting this morning. Daniel 9 and 12. They show the end time that we're in right now. Now in verse 14, no one can show this knowledge except Yahweh. He's the only one who claims to foretell the future. Now this is, again, keep your mind on the title of this sermon. The sermon is all about prophecy. Okay, none of the gods claim to foretell the future, or to raise the dead, or heal the sick, or anything. They don't have that power. It's not given to them. They only have the power to deceive. Okay? They make you sicker. They come in and gather the money that's brought forth from the drugs, and they take it back and spend it on whoredom and more God worship, storing the money away. I don't know what they're storing it away for. They've got more than they'll ever use now to buy more paintings, I guess. And you think about all of the people in the world are so materialistic when they get wealth. They want to buy something not to have food the next day, but to look at, I guess of naked gods and build more statues of them. I'm just guessing what they're doing with it. Now, the next several paragraphs deal with the military and the build-up that Yahweh has prophesied, in these last days. So let's turn over to page number 4. And we're going to go ahead and continue in verse 22. Okay, verse 22 on page 4. Well, he just showed you that so you would understand that you can't do it on your own. You've got to join the group at this house. And the first thing that comes to my mind, and it should be in everybody else's mind, is how pastors promoted teamwork. We're not going to do this on our own. Just like pastor can't do it on his own. He's got to create a team, which he has, and he's delegated things just as the supervisors delegate responsibilities today on the work crews. Okay? Let's see here. Where did we leave off at? You've got to join the group at his house. And that's the reason Yeshua said this. He said, go to the place. The place is the great house of Yahweh. Deuteronomy 12:5. Okay, Yochanan 14. Let's turn there and read that one. I mentioned this before last week. Yochanan 14:29. He says, so now I have told you before it comes to pass. The importance that we see on this, the significance of this is that no one can do that. No person can do that. Yahweh can, but no person can do that. And Yahweh puts this out for everyone to know that. He can forecast everything. He's got everything under control. He's the one who created mankind for the purpose of making, listen to this, for the purpose of making you, making those he calls, making those who will come to him and will receive him in his image, in the image of Yahweh. Okay? He put it as receiving him. More needs to be brought on that, out on that. I think one of the younger priests has got one plan to bring on the word receives. And this is very important, this next part here. But those who receive it, which is you and I, as we're sitting here today, together with the audience on the internet, but those who receive it, take it by law and put it to work in their lives. Yahweh says those will receive the light, the truth, the laws, and those will be guaranteed to become what? The sons and daughters of Yahweh. That is a great promise that Pastor has given to us in these the last days, that if we obey and we follow the teachings of the house of Yahweh as set forth by him, by Pastor, again, under Yeshua's inspiration, all coming from Yahweh, we have this great gift that's in store for us to become sons and daughters of Yahweh. Okay? So let's go down to verse 27. Okay? Pastor says, if you realize this and remember this, we're on trial. Satan is in court, taking us to court. Now, who's our defense attorney? Yeshua, right, correct. Yeshua, the great high priest, he's our defense attorney, and Pastor has explained this and taught this to us many years ago. Okay? Taking us to court, standing at my right hand, yes, that's me, we're on trial. Yahweh says to heaven and earth, witness this now. That's in Deuteronomy 30. And Satan is standing accusing. And the best example that we can see this is in the book of Job, or Yeshua. Okay, and Satan is standing accusing. She's the accuser of the brethren, the accuser. She's laughing and saying, look what this man did. Look what this man did. Well, it doesn't matter what you did 20 years ago. If you repented for it, it's blotted out. Yeshua's blood washed it out. And if you think about it, how quick and how subtle she is in the courts of heaven to try to suppress Yeshua's authority. Okay? And if you look at the caption in the bottom there, if you realize this and remember this, we are on trial. Okay, now let's go over to the next page, page 5. Drop down to verse 30. We're the only ones who have the answers, and these answers are written. They're actually written, for each and every one of us to study by. There's so much material that's written by the house of Yahweh, it's hard to keep up. Okay, starting in 1976, They were written in the mark of the beast, as the great Kohan brought out there this morning. And in verse 31, another point that Pastor makes very, very important here. It's Yahweh's plan. As Genesis 1:26 says, he tells us what he's going to do. And then when? The last days. The last days he's going to establish his house, and that's where salvation is offered. So we all understand and know, and of course those that come will come to that understanding, that salvation is only offered at the house of Yahweh, and it can only be at the house of Yahweh because the house of Yahweh is the one that's been given authority. It has the teacher, the one sent, and also, of course, it's teaching Yahweh's laws and prophecies. Okay, so continuing on there, Pastor says, he said before that there was no salvation. That is it. Why? Because if you don't receive the power to resurrect the dead, none of them will be resurrected. And of course, he's talking about, as we read in the book of Hebrews, about all who have died in the faith, all who have qualified to be resurrected in this first resurrection, but haven't received a reward yet. They can't receive that reward until we qualify. Okay? That is why, okay, let's see. Let's go ahead and read it again. Why? Because if we don't receive the power to resurrect the dead, none of them will be resurrected. That's what Yahweh shows. He works through man. No, he doesn't work through angels. To which of the angels did he ever say this? None of them at all. Read and believe what he, Yahweh, says. Okay? Let's turn over to the next page. Okay, page 6. Okay, in verse 37. Okay, so the king, now this is another important point that Pastor brings forth here about what the scribes, the Pharisees and all that has been brought forth today through the Catholic Church, how the parallel between what it was back then and what it is today. Okay, so the kings of Israel, when they first started in the days of Samuel, they built an army, and we see that today, and then we understand through Daniel's prophecy that the army will stand on its part being for the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church doesn't have the army. The army is in those governments that she rules over, okay? And then, and of course he's talking back again about the kings of the earth, but as an example of the way it is today. And then they wanted more territory. Look at what's taking place today. Even in today's news about the United States and North Korea. Okay? And then they wanted more territory. The ones who owned the army said, let's take this group in. That will give us this much more taxes. So you could see it's nothing but wealth and power that is brought forth through the beastly governments of the world today. Let's go over here next and take that group. Well, that was the way they started spreading. Well, the people, instead of building religious communities, are working to enter the kingdom, to learn what milk and honey were, to learn how to get salvation. They got their minds totally on this way, as Samuel said that they would. And of course, we see that trickle down is taking place all the way to the way it is today. And every government is out to be bigger and better than the next one. Okay? Let's, go over to verse 41. Okay, Yeshua said, no one can come to me unless the Spirit of the Father draws him. Now, he wasn't speaking of Casper the Weinberger, or Casper the Friendly Ghost, a wine bubbler, a drunkard. No, he wasn't speaking of any of that. He was speaking about his house, and this is what Daniel saw. And Daniel didn't understand it, he said, but he saw it, and he wrote it down for us. Then the writings became authority from Yahweh for us here in the last days. Once Daniel put these writings out, they became the authority of Yahweh to the house of Yahweh, so that we could bring forth this information out in prophecy. Okay? Up until the time of Yeshua, we were spoken to by the prophets of Yahweh. We were spoken to. Now, somehow or another, if you can imagine this, these amazing instructions that was put in the microorganisms that were to make up your brain, your subconscious mind, these were kingdoms and kingdoms of microorganisms that were computerized to take in certain knowledge. And everything that Pastor has taught us about the microorganisms and that world, the creeping things that creep, we should know and understand that we will have control over that, over those microorganisms one day. Okay, so let's go over to the next page in verse 46. Okay, in verse 46, Pastor says, let's go up to verse 45. Yahweh has put together what he wants to put together, and Yahweh is going to put together 2 billion who are going to teach. Now drop down to verse 46. Think of the impossible. Think of the impossible. Remember how quickly you started sinning in your life. You were made subject to sin, you and I. Okay, all of us were. But you overcame it because Yeshua, he overcame. He didn't sin, but he had the same pulls and desires to sin that you have now. Now remember that and think about, how judgment is. And when you run across someone who has fallen short, in the house of Yahweh, don't be rushing to judgment, and look at them, because, look at them in a negative way, because we ourselves are only saved, by the blood of Yeshua, just as that person will be when they do repent. Okay? He didn't sin, but he had the same pulls and desires to sin that you have now. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and end now on page 7. And if everyone would please stand, I have the great honor and the privilege to introduce our next teacher, the great Kohan David DePaus Hawkins.
Okay, you may be seated. So we're continuing in this 17th book of Israel. And we're going to start off on continue on page 8. Page 8. Verse 53. He says in verse 4, in this plan was life. So we know that Yahweh is the only one who offers life. Nobody else. Do you have another Bible somewhere? No. You've got the same one I was raised on. I found this. Yahweh showed it to me in the King James Version. And we can get the truth from there. And it should lead us to the house, though, where we get the whole truth and nothing but the truth. For anyone to learn about salvation, anyone in the entire world, there's only one place you can go to get it. And that's right here. And that's a fundamental truth, brethren. Now we're bringing this into every home, but you're required to respond to it and come to his house. See, that's a requirement. Come to his house. And he actually put that in Scripture. Go to his house. Don't do the things that you're doing now. Everyone doing what is pleasing in his own sight. You're liable to get you a guitar, get behind closed doors in the dark, and start getting people to commit fornication and adultery. That's how bad it is and how easy it is for a dummy, a fool, to get drawn out of Yahweh's work. And, we're men, we have desires, and Yahweh put desires within us, but we have to put them under control. Okay? And we should not get sidetracked with the objective that Yahweh gives us. If you have a desire to have a wife, that's a great desire, that's fine. But focus on things that Scripture says, work diligently at what your hands find to do. And there's a lot of things that Yahweh has given us to do. Okay? Focus on improving yourself. And in time, all of a sudden, who knows, Yahweh may give you a wife. He says a wife is a gift from Yahweh. Okay? But focus first on what it says in Matthew 6 verse 33. Seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and His righteousness. We'll have all eternity for a lot of other things, brethren. Don't walk out this building. Don't walk out this house, leaving it searching for something in this world that is not forever. Verse 55. Now, that light shines in the darkness. And that's an interesting statement right there. That light shines in the darkness. It says, remember that word darkness. I'll show you in prophecy where it's prophesied. But the darkness doesn't take hold of it. But it's shining in the darkness. This message is going out into this dark world. You see? The house is coming from the House of Yahweh. The House of Yahweh is like a flashlight. Right? At midnight. It is shining in there. It's a work being described when it says it's shining in the darkness. You see? They can't, unless the Spirit of the Father draws them, you can't do it. So they can't take a hold onto this. Let's go down to middle of verse 57. Second, and that's a great thing that Yahweh gives to us too, that He's allowed us to be able to see the light. That's a blessing. Okay? Count your blessings. That is a blessing, that we are able to see the light. I mean, you could be talking to somebody, some relative or some friend out there, or somebody that you just meet, that somehow a scripture comes up, or maybe it's about Christmas and stuff, and they can't see what you're saying. They cannot see it, but you can see it clearly. But let me tell you, if you get distracted, you can come to the point where the important message, the things of Yahweh, is not as important. It's not as focused, okay, as when it was before. So we have to be careful. I plead with you, brethren, not as though I wrote any new laws to you, but that which we had from the beginning. He's not speaking about new laws. And by the way, when you talk about deception, the criteria for deception is always based on the law. If it's not according to the law, that means you're being deceived. Okay? I remember on the stage right over there, a few years ago, that a man said something. He was a rich man, and he read a scripture in Yakanan, and then he tried to make out like Yeshua brought something different from the laws. And people shook his hand when he came off the stage. They were waiting for him. I was waiting for him too, Pastor says. And I said, why didn't you read the next verse? The next verse plainly contradicted what he said. And he told his comrades that I attacked him. I didn't really attack him. I just explained the truth. it was a little harder. I was a little harder then than I am now, so it probably wasn't as pleasant. But he left. The man left. But I explained in detail and showed him the scripture that he didn't read. You see that? That's the patience and mercy of Yahweh right there. And I said, can't you see that? But he had probably gone too far, in the other direction for him to see something that I'm pretty sure he was able to see before. And that's why we have to protect the belief that Yahweh gives us. We have to protect it. We have to treat it like jewels, right? You wouldn't put jewels somewhere where it can be destroyed or stolen. You have to protect it. Well, anyway, this is how easily people get turned off. And the people who shook his hand, they left too. See? Be careful of who you associate with. Be careful with who you are in agreement with. Okay? Because it has an influence. Verse 60. It says, and this is love. This is love that you heard from the beginning. As shown in verse 5. In the beginning, from the beginning, that we love one another. 1 Yochanan 3 verse 10 says, if you don't keep Yahweh's laws, then you don't love your brother. If you don't keep Yahweh's laws, you're sinning against your brother. Every time you break a law, you're sinning against your brother. Yeshua said, if you look onto a woman with illegal lust for her, and this includes the woman as well, if you look onto a man with illegal lust and you're married, you're committing sin. And also, online, all the nakedness that you see there, we're corrupting our brains. We are rewriting our brains to enjoy sin. You see? We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that, brethren. And if that has been your practice, get rid of it. These are the things you've got to get out of your mind. Get out of your subconscious mind. Tell yourself how evil it is. Repent of it and ask Yahweh's help in doing so. This is an urgent matter here, brethren, that we need to pay attention to. We have to be real serious about this. Okay? Well, in 2 Yochanan 1 verse 6 here, and this is love that we walk. This love, you see that the first three words, this is love. Christian preachers, it's not love to break Yahweh's law. This is love. This is what the King James Version says too. Every version I've read says the same thing. And this is love, that we walk after his laws, that you keep his commandments. Satan doesn't teach love. Show what she teaches. 1 Yochanan 3 verse 4 and 7 to 8 shows what she teaches. You belong to Satan if you break these laws. She teaches to follow evil like the gods. Yahweh said, don't follow the evil like the gods. The Creator said that. Back to Yochanan 6. Now, start with verse 62. Yeshua said, then what if you would see the Son of Man ascending where he will be high priest? When Yeshua said that, it's like when pastors say, or when pastor shows Yeshua and the branch will hold the authority or the council of peace. Okay? Something like that could shock a person who is not aware of these prophecies. You see? let's go on to verse 65. It is the Spirit that gives life. It is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh is useless. The flesh is useless. Now, here is where they conjure up in their minds Caspar the friendly ghost, and all of them are wanting to turn to Caspar body, like this spiritual body that you see they depict in the movies, and go floating around on clouds. Verse 66, it is the Spirit that gives life. And this Spirit that we're talking about is character, brethren. Is character. Make every day of your life one in which you build this character. Okay? You're going to be confronted with things that if you practice holding your tongue, okay, and practice self-control, not just being impulsive, not just letting somebody know what's on your mind, okay, and you practice those things, then you will be stronger in them. That's the strength of Yahweh, you see. Well, what is the Spirit? What gives you life? It is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh is useless. The laws that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life everlasting. In verse 70, we continue there. It says, blessed are those who keep his laws. This is coming from Revelation 22, verse 14. That they may have right to the tree of life. Now remember what Yochanan said. In this plan was life. Well, Yeshua, who speaks to us, as Hebrews says Yeshua is the high priest who speaks to us in these days through his word that we repeated to Yochanan until he got it right and got it written down. This is like, having a vision of Pastor and the things that Pastor was reading and writing it down. That's a really interesting. In verse 72, Yochanan 1 verse 12 says, those who receive him, he gave them power to become sons and daughters. Yes, that's what you've got right now. That's the opportunity that you have. That's the opportunity that we have, okay, to become sons and daughters of Yahweh. You've got power, authority, the opportunity, and the potential to actually become a son or a daughter of Yahweh. That is something to work for, something to aspire to, something that is a great desire. It is as it says in Genesis, a fruit that is desirable. Okay? In fact, it's the most desirable thing to become a son or daughter of Yahweh. Now here in Revelation 22 verse 14 it says, blessed are those who keep his laws. This is the Savior doing the speaking. Verse 15, for outside are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and so forth. The sodomites, yes, that's a great message about them. So you see, brethren, we don't want to be on the outside. That's not what we have been given, the opportunity to be on the inside and to be sons and daughters. Now, verse 77. Now that light shines in the darkness. We're not covering it. We're taking it out for all the world to see. So in other words, we're not putting a cover over the light so that people can't see it. We're spreading this message, in other words. Now that light shines in the darkness. It's shining right now. You can pick this up anywhere in the world. If you've got a computer, if you've got a telephone, By the way, we've got televisions now, I'm told, that are actually computerized, and you can actually program this thing. You can smash a button here, smash a button, and there, the house of Yahweh. Let's go to verse 81. Think of this. This land was not even discovered until 1492, supposedly, and Yahweh made it possible in the writing of the laws for freedom of speech. The Catholic, they're trying to take that away, by the way. They're working overnight to take away the First Amendment. Believe it or not. It won't be long before the faith that we are supposed to be building and strengthening within us is put to the test, brethren. Don't waste time with sinning and all these things. Every day build that faith, because it will be tested. Okay, the Catholic Church was trying to get full control of it to stop it, but Yahweh saw to it the freedom of speech would be included in the laws of the United States. The preaching and publishing of this message couldn't be done in any other nation. They wouldn't let you. They'd kill you. They kill some here too, but Yahweh stands guard. He encamps about his house. Remember that. That's why we're still alive and speaking today. This light now shines in the darkness. If you got that, if you look at Psalm 119 verse 105, you see what that light is. Your laws are a lamp. That means two things that you need to keep in mind. First, it represents the seventh lampstand, the seven prophesied works of Yahweh. Remember, Yahweh said, I will have no other, rest assured, I will have no other work except that which is prophesied. Did you know? Let's jump down here to verse 86. 86, got to keep track of this down. Okay. Well, in Psalm 119, verse 130, he says, the unfolding of your laws gives light. They give understanding to the simple. So here we see that they bring understanding, quickness of understanding, and even change the heart, as Malachi said. Now remember the word darkness in Yachanan 1 verse 5. And look at Jeremiah now. This is the beginning as to our day. Jeremiah 23. This brings us to our time period where we're in, where we're actually given enjoyable bodies. And this is another blessing. We're given enjoyable bodies where you can actually take this body and enjoy the fuel that goes in it. You don't have to back up to the gas pump and pump it in. You can eat, and you can sit down with brothers and eat and enjoy it with your taste buds that Yahweh gave you. They're made out of microorganisms that are ruling in your mouth right now, guarding your teeth and your gums and your vocal cords so you can talk. All of these things Yahweh created, brethren. Think of the wisdom that this being has, brethren, and then you can begin to understand all these beautiful things he's showing you right here. Jeremiah 23, and look at verse 1. Woe to the pastors who destroy and scatter. You see how pastor uplift Yahweh right here. And, to show how the intricate thought that he put into the creation, that he put into us, and the creation around us that we could enjoy. So he says, "Woe to the pastors who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture," says Yahweh. If you remember how now when Yahweh's prophet Samuel was judging Israel, he was supreme judge of Israel. He followed the laws. He taught the laws. He had a circuit he followed throughout Israel, and then came back to his home. You see, the thing that the children of Israel wanted was to take matters into their own hands. You see, Yahweh was fighting their battles for them. Is Yahweh fighting your battles for you, brethren? Or are you fighting it yourself? Make sure that Yahweh is fighting your battles for you. Okay? And don't be anxious about your life. Okay? Don't be anxious about your life. Let Yahweh fight the battles for you. You see? The children of Israel, it shows that when Shaul and Jonathan, the first king that was selected, went out, and gathered men to fight, only Shaul and Jonathan had swords. Think about that. Out of the whole nation of Israel, only Shaul and his son had a sword. That's how much Yahweh was fighting their battles for them. They didn't need the weaponry, because Yahweh was fighting their battles for them. But they wanted the rich men that told Samuel that they want a king like the other nations. They wanted to have the weaponry and take matters into their own hands. You see? But we don't. We don't have to fight our own battles. Okay. I'm fighting a battle here with this clock. But I'm not going to fight that battle. No, I'm just kidding. Verse 96. The Vatican is this strong group that came from those people right there. I would read all that, but the strong group of kings that scattered my sheep with religions. They wouldn't be scattered if they would have hung on to Samuel. And there was a part in there where Samuel asked him, tell me what evil have I done? Which man have I defrauded? And so forth and so on. And the whole nation of Israel, they said, Samuel, you have done nothing that, someone could blame you for. Okay? He was a great reflection of Yahweh. You see? They wouldn't have been scattered. Yahweh would have sent them another leader. Even when Samuel died, they could have had a strong leader after that and stayed with Yahweh. No wars, no fighting. Or if there is anybody who come against them, let Yahweh will deal with that. You see? The thing is, if you're not used to exercising faith, if you're not used to exercising your faith, it becomes painful. You see? It's like trying to use a muscle that you haven't used. Right? But if we are exercising our faith, okay, it will become easier for us to trust in Yahweh to fight our battles for us. Their faith was not being exercised, although they had so much that they could have seen, that they saw. Let's go to verse 103. It says, the news today is filled with exactly what Yahweh said it would be filled with at this time period. We see the greatest suffering ever. We see the fourth part of the earth being mentioned in the news as well as prophecy now. And that fourth part of the earth, I didn't know if you got that from the House of Yahweh, or maybe they got it from the Holy Scriptures. But they're recognizing that all this war is taking place in that fourth part of the earth. It will spread, it's going to, but the United States will be protected to the very end. I've encamped about my house. He started that before the United States were settled. We already had plans for all this before 1492. Satan came in and tried to stop his house. She tried, but Yahweh outsmarted her as usual. He put within this country's laws things that would protect his house. And then he inspired certain people in high offices, as high as the presidency, to take notice and to do a portion of his will. We see that he did this sometime with kings in the scriptures. It shouldn't be too hard to believe what took place with the house of Yahweh earlier. Yahweh had planned before the United States was settled that his house would be here in the last part of the United States, in the last part, the ends of the earth. This was the last part of the United States that would be settled. He had it all planned and he prophesied it, but no one understood it. People read about the branch, but they don't understand. The scholars have fumbled over these scriptures for years, trying to understand who this branch is. Some said it was Melchizedek. Well, he's dead. Wipe. You can forget about that one. Some said it was Jesus Christ. No, he didn't. He hadn't been invented yet. When these prophecies were written, those gods came up later. But even the worldly scholars are curious about who the branch is. Well, Daniel was too. He said he saw him and talked to him, but he didn't understand. Yahweh said, close the books. You'll understand it in the end. Well, the end started in 1934. The end, the last generation. It started in 1934 with the branch, along with the inventions of the internet and the nuclear bombs that they're facing right now. We're the only one who even have that understanding. It won't be too long now. These kings are getting ready to have this nuclear war. What Yahweh is doing is trying to teach you and encourage you not to fear. Don't fear. Don't be anxious. The world, the United States, is full of people who are anxious. Yahweh is telling us, don't do this. Have faith in Yahweh. Have faith in Yahweh that he's camped about this house. Act like you believe this. Okay? Yahweh is going to keep this work going right through the end. They will come to us. They will be coming to us. Praise Yahweh. May Yahweh bless you. And may Yahweh bless your understanding. All right.